We are back on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio, News Talk, 1180, 1230, KGEO, 1410 KERI in Albuquerque, New Mexico on 1000 KKIM, and now in Richmond, Oakland, and the San Francisco Bay Area, which is going to be really great with the kind of guests we have. We're going to go over really well in the Bay Area, Greg. What do you think? So we're going to take a little turn here. Our guest by phone is an old friend of the program, Michael Reagan. Mike, welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Hey, good to be with you, Marty.
Always a pleasure, my friend. Always a pleasure. So let's start off with an event that you're going to be speaking at here in Kern County in October 24th.
Yeah, coming up about a week from now. I'm speaking up there for the Alzheimer's group up there in Kern County. Looking forward to come up there and speaking with them, sharing some of my life and my father's life, of course, with them and helping them raise money for a very worthwhile cause.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that issue. I'm actually going through it now with my dad. My dad lives in British Columbia. I'm originally Canadian, and went up and saw him a couple of weeks ago, and he it took a day or two before he really knew who I was, and. I know. I think you and I have talked about this in the past. I think you went through the same thing with your father.
Yeah, I went through it, but I wasn't uncomfortable. I had a great life with my father. I think too many people, forget about that great life that they in fact had with their parents who are going through this terrible disease, and are worried about, are they going to know me, and what have you, and they get caught up in all of that instead of going back and saying, gosh, what a great life I had with my mother, what a great life I had with my father or my uncle, what can I do in this new period of their life to help them get through it. My sister Maureen used to do puzzles with our father. And it's interesting because they would start off as, 500-piece puzzles, then they'd have to go to 250-piece puzzles, then they were 100-piece puzzles, then they were 15 and 10 and so on because of the disease. But she found things to do. My son Cameron and my daughter Ashley would take down books and picture books and look at picture books with their grandfather. So instead of worrying about do they know me or not, they would find where, in fact, Grandpa or Dad lived at that point mentally, and they would play to that part of them and find a new place to have a relationship instead of worrying about the old one.
That's a perfect segue, Michael. I was about to say the same thing. It's like you and I prepped this. I think the philosophy needs to be you need to meet them where they are and not try to pull them back to where you are because they're not there anymore.
No, they're not there anymore at all. No. And people need to really, kind of understand that and say, gosh, I had such a great life. Mm-hmm. And this is a perfect way to sit there and say, if you've got a family member who's going into it, make amends.
Yeah.
Make amends. Get that all done with it. Don't be left with the fact, gosh, I wish I would have.
Yes.
If I only could have.
If I only could have. Yeah.
Get it done now.
You bet. I was sitting there with my dad, and it sounds like a surrealistic conversation, but I know you could appreciate this. We were sitting there, and my dad was a World War II veteran. He met my mom in Holland during the war. He was a Canadian soldier, and had a great life as an author and a speaker. And I had him on the show. We did a show on The Greatest Generation. My mom played with Anne Frank as a kid, and he had some experiences. So I had a Greatest Generation show, and I had him on last year. So when I saw him a couple weeks ago, he asked me about who I was and some different things that kind of spark a memory a little bit. And I said, Dad, I had you on my radio show about a year ago. He goes, really? He goes, how'd I do? I said, you did great. Well, people in the room thought it was surrealistic, but I was meeting him where he was, and I explained to him about the show, and he goes, well, that sounds like it would have been a great show. I said, yeah, you did a pretty good job, for an old guy with limited social skills, and he got a laugh out of it. So, it's meeting them where they are because, they're just not there. And that window gets smaller and smaller, but, you've got to approach them and like you said, have a new relationship with them based on what they can handle at the time.
Oh, absolutely. And you find a lot of people get caught up. It's about them, not about the one who has Alzheimer's, mm-hmm. but it's about that other verse said, it's about me.
Yeah.
No, it's not about me. It's about thee. And you also have to really think about the caregiver, the person who is the one. Like Nancy. She was lucky enough. Nancy's lucky enough to have the money to be able to have the doctors and nurses in to take care of my father. But so many others don't have those kind of resources to have people come in and take care of your loved one. And Dad couldn't be put into a home like today. No. There's places where you can put your loved one in a facility that does the puzzles and does some of the things, and they're around people. But you couldn't put my father there. Not with cell phones today and no privacy. I mean, there'd be pictures coming out of my father, in the home 24 hours a day, and the media would be printing them 24 hours a day. So Nancy had to protect her husband, our father, from all of that, so kept him at home for all those years that he had Alzheimer's.
Sure. We're having a conversation with author and TV and television and radio host Michael Reagan. And I'm lucky in that regard too, because my dad is married to a really neat lady who's a retired psychologist at the University of British Columbia. So, he's got it made in that same vein. They live up in the mountains, but it would be tough for somebody that doesn't have the means to have someone take care of them, because luckily we all have Obamacare now, Michael.
Yeah, well, we have Obamacare, but the reality is, the good news is America. We figured out a way to live longer. The bad news in America is we figured out a way to live longer.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the longer we live, the more susceptible we are to, in fact, Alzheimer's, disease that is out there. And when you've got a disease, Alzheimer's basically is the C word of this generation.
Yes.
Because there is no cure. I mean, you can go and be tested and find out you've got the gene that carries Alzheimer's. Okay, that's the bad news. The real bad news is there anything we can do about it?
Yeah.
And so you have that kind of a situation, and people are still running away from it. They don't want people to know that it's in the family and what have you. And so it's very hard to find people who want to be tested, and so what have you. But there's a lot of work that's being done. I chair the John Douglas French Alzheimer's Foundation, which deals 100% in funding research for a cure for Alzheimer's, but that's still a long ways off.
Oh, sure. Do you think, without getting too controversial on this subject, but the stem cell research, I think there was a disagreement between you and Nancy about that, as far as whether or not because what happens is the conservative right and the liberal left decided to turn it into a pro-life, pro-choice issue. Right.
It was never a pro-life, pro-choice issue when it came to stem cell research per se. It really was, does it work or not work?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And stem cell research will never, ever, ever in the history of mankind ever be a cure for Alzheimer's disease. And what you're saying is you're asking for a stem cell to recreate the whole brain.
Right.
That's just not going to happen. That's a God thing. That's not a stem cell thing. And so that was my argument, that if the conservatives would have kept it in the realm of research, what research is being done anywhere in the world where stem cells are helping cure Alzheimer's disease. And I'm not talking about stem cells per se, I'm talking about embryonic stem cells.
Right.
Embryonic stem cells are not being used anywhere in the world to cure anything. Adult stem cells are, in fact, being used to help cure about 24, 25 different diseases. And what happens is we got so caught up in the embryonic stem cell research, and Stanford University built a building. Nothing's come out of that building. Billions of dollars being spent in California. Not one cure has come out of Stanford University in that building since California voted to give it $10 billion. But there are, in fact, cures coming out of adult stem cell. But the $10 billion can't go to adult stem cell. It can only go to embryonic stem cell. And so because we got caught in this, pro-life, pro-choice thing, the money started to be lacking in the adult stem cell world. And that's really unfortunate. So the argument was really, and I think the embryonic people should be spanked for this. What they do is they go to people who have got loved ones who are hurting. Mm-hmm. In Alzheimer's or whatever, and say, hey, I've got the cure. if only we can, will you support this? And of course, Nancy wanted to cure her husband of Alzheimer's.
Oh, sure.
Or cure other people. And she has doctors coming to her and scientists coming to her. This is it. This is the new way out. And so she supports it. And unfortunately, she got caught up in the feelings of it. And because I chair the John Douglas French Alzheimer's Foundation, I'm working with scientists all of the time. She's not.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And so it wasn't really a disagreement with Nancy. I understood where she was coming from. It was my disagreement with the fact that they were using Nancy and using other people. I mean, when was the last time you saw Michael, what's his name, doing an ad for stem cell research?
Yeah.
Embryonic stem cell. You don't see him doing ads for embryonic stem cell research because it's not working anywhere.
Exactly.
At all for Parkinson's disease and what have you. And so, again, that was my argument, that they were using people, Christopher Reeves, and right down the line, to sell them a bill of goods that just wasn't working.
I agree.
And that money was being spent, which could have been spent somewhere else, that might have helped a disease and helped in a cure, but they got caught up on the embryonic side. And my side was as guilty because they let it be turned into a pro-life, pro-choice issue.
Exactly. Michael, when we come back from the break, let's talk about a few current issues, okay? We'll be back in a moment. We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Current Radio News Talk 1180.